Hi, on today's episode of the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast, I'll be joined by my friend Peter Blum. Peter is a hypnotist like me. He's also a sound healer. He's just got this amazing ability to use music in a form of healing that's quite remarkable. He is a comedian, he's a jester, he's an ordained minister, he's all sorts of things. And he's also a fascinating, deep person that you're going to enjoy a great deal. So, with no further ado, let's get started. You are listening to the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast, a show devoted to uncovering the systems and the secrets that set the best apart, where you learn how to take your coaching clients to the next level, while you grow the coaching practice of your dreams. So sit back and relax, or sit up and get excited. Either way, you might want to pay attention. This could be important. Hey, Peter.
Doug,
Welcome to the podcast.
thank you.
Now, you and I are talking from not too very far away from each other. You are in Woodstock, New York. Is that correct?
Yes.
And I'm not far from there. And we met for the first time. I can't believe this because we have so much in common. After we talked for a while, it's like, you know them, I know them, you know. It's like we have so much in common. We met this weekend in Woodstock teaching a workshop together.
I feel like I've known you for a really long time.
I know. It's amazing.
Right?
Yeah. So I asked you to be on this podcast today because I want other people to know you too. We have so much in common, and it's deep stuff. I'm skeptical often of people with the claims that they make because you can get certified in a weekend in hypnosis or whatever. But you've been around longer than, well, at least as long as I have doing this stuff. So could you just give us a little background, a little taste of who you are and where does this all come from?
The short bio.
Yeah.
Grew up in New York City. Was a survivor of the 60s. Did it full tilt, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And moved to Woodstock in 1969 and did a variety of things. I was exploring life. I had dropped out of college because I wanted to learn, and I wasn't it wasn't the best environment for me. But I am an autodidact, and I read voraciously, and I worked in a in the first year or two that I was living in Woodstock. I worked in a metaphysical, or we called it an occult bookstore. I managed and eventually was a co-owner of that. So that was a lot of my education. I was very curious about Eastern and Western mystery traditions, and read voraciously, tried to find people that could teach me about yoga, meditation, tarot, astrology, various oracular devices, etc., things like that. Got married, started raising children, decided I needed to get a real job, and worked as a journalist for a number of years. Writer, editor, local newspaper here, the Woodstock Times. From 73 to 78, I had the self-titled position of guru reviewer. There were a lot of them coming through at that time.
They still are streaming through, apparently.
All the men and women from the East at that point. There were a big stream of arrivals from India and Ceylon, and teachers of yoga meditation from different lineages. And I had the hubris to think that I could go and write a critique of these different Swami Satchidananda or Baba Ram Das. But
love those guys.
Yeah, well, I was following my curiosity. These were the things I was curious about. I had taken a lot of psychedelics, and then I stopped at a certain point, and I was very influenced by Baba Ram Dass's book, Be Here Now, where he talked about his experience with Richard Alpert at Harvard and all the experiments they did on their own consciousness with psychedelics, and then finally going to India because he'd heard there were people there who could achieve those same states without the pill,
Yes.
which is coincidentally sort of what brought us together this past weekend. Right?
Yeah, if I might interrupt for a moment, that's exactly what brought us together this weekend. I remember you telling that part of the story this weekend is that Bob Ram Dass's guru, the fellow in India, or no, I'm sorry, Ram Dass's guru person in India, took sort of Ram Dass, for those of you who don't know, is also known as, was that Richard Alpert?
Richard Alpert, Dr. Richard Alpert.
From Harvard, who was with Timothy Leary, part of the tune in, turn on, and drop out school of getting out of school. But he was very famous for that. So he brought out LSD, which was pretty new on the scene, really, in a sense, at that time, to India. And his guru person just like took all of it, was fine, because he was able to get to the States. This did nothing.
Yeah. I mean, he teased Ram Dass a little bit by pretending that it was making him crazy. And then he sort of winked and he said, no, yogis have known about this medicine for a long time. And it's good to take in a cool place occasionally. But this always stuck with me. He said it lets you visit Jesus, but you can't stay.
You can't stay.
Yeah.
You can visit, but you can't stay. So in order to stay, you need to do something more of the meditations.
You need to find other ways that can we make this. I have a teacher. I've been so fortunate. I've had some wonderful, wonderful, wise beings that I've come across who I've been able to hang out with. And one of them who I talked about this past weekend, Joseph Real, beautiful painted arrow, was a Picaris Pueblo mystic and visionary and artist and writer and painter and I would say he lives where I get to visit occasionally. His consciousness and to model people. We talk about that a lot in our field, right? To model.
Yes.
You find someone who embodies excellence in anything, and just do whatever you can to be around them and study them and imitate them and follow them and it's difficult because it can be challenging because my own personal history and background is very different from his. He grew up traditionally on a reservation. That's, training early on in childhood by his grandparents to be a visionary and a mystic.
Yeah.
While I was watching The Twilight Zone on TV or.
Yeah.
So anyway, but yes, I'm digressing for a second. So coming back to my own history, that I was doing that. I moved to Holland for 3 years. I lived in Amsterdam from 78 to 81. Brought my family there. Wanted to live outside of the country for a while in a different culture, which was very good experience. Came back, went back to work for the newspaper, this time in the position of an editor. But I used to tell people, I don't know what I want to do when I grow up. There I was 36, 37, 38. I did what I knew how to do. I was good with words. I worked in publishing, I worked in bookstore, I worked as a journalist, as a writer and editor. But, my real interest was consciousness. My real fascination was, what is this thing? Mind and spirit and consciousness. And so I was doing a series of interviews following, again, my passion for the newspaper on alternative forms of healing.
Was this related to the criticism of
the guru was doing? No, this was another extension where I was actually doing person profiles of healers.
Okay.
To introduce our readers to, in '84, people didn't know that much about acupuncture. They didn't know what shiatsu was. They didn't know about Rolfing. A lot of these are body-centered therapies, and I was interviewing people who did these things and writing about it.
And you also got to experience them too, did you not?
That was one of the perks of the job, is that I got to, get Rolfed and chiropracted and acupunctured. And then my friend Richard Zarrow, whom I had been in sweat lodges and had various experiences with in the 70s, who had been gone in California, came back and he contacted me and he said, I think you should include me in this series. I'm doing Ericksonian hypnosis and neurolinguistic programming. I
And
had
you said,
no idea what he was talking
what?
about, whatever. I didn't really know what Rolfing was either, or
Right.
before I did it. So I went and I spent a few times, and I know you've seen my book, and I wrote about this
Hmm.
section in my book. Yeah, thank you. And now a quick word from our sponsor. Yeah,
Most people, when they listen to this podcast, don't see the pictures, but I'm holding up his book
okay,
now.
yeah, thank you.
Oh.
So Richard was fascinating, and I got again to experience as part of my research what he was doing.
Mhm.
And it was really interesting because he was a great believer in self hypnosis, and he used to say, really all hypnosis on some level is self hypnosis.
Sure. He wasn't the first person to say that, but
No.
yes. Yeah.
So in order to prove his point, after talking to me about Erickson and Grinder and Bandler and NLP and so on, he had been out in California studying with John Grinder,
Hmm.
and he brought me into his session room, and he had one of these chairs. It was the Panasonic Getaway chair. It did everything but what. You sat back in it, it reclined, it rollers went up and down the acupuncture meridians of your spine, the calf vibrated, there were speakers that came around.
That's speakers too. So it's beyond a massage chair. It's just,
Speakers that he put, because we were using cassette tapes, he put a
yeah.
HPP, hypnoperipheral
Oh,
process,
those are great. Yeah.
double induction tape
Double
in.
inductions. Yeah.
Right?
Very good.
And then he put an early version of the alpha theta brainwave machines on me with blinking
Blinking lights and
lights and pulse sound. And
yeah.
then he left the room. And he was gone for, I don't know, 20, 25 minutes till the tape was over. And he came back in, and I felt like Woody Allen coming out of the Orgasmatron, in that movie. I was like, whoa, dude, that was fabulous. But I said, first of all, it's kind of familiar. I mean, it's not all that different. If that's hypnosis, I kind of recognize that state.
Yeah, I've been there before. Yeah.
He said, yeah, it's on the spectrum of consciousness. You've explored a few of those bandwidths. And I said, and secondly, you didn't do anything. He said, exactly. So I was like, okay, I kind of get it, right? So then I went back and I wrote the article. I mean, there was more to this story, but I don't want to spend too much time with it. I put it to the test, and I went back and I said, what would I use it for?
Yeah.
Said,
So let me see if I can just actually interrupt you again.
sure.
The point of this podcast for a lot of our listeners is, what are they going to use? How are
Right.
they going to use this stuff? So now that you got to the point where you were asking yourself how you could use it,
Yes.
how could that? What can we take away from this? How is it used?
I said, what could I use it for? He said, anything you want.
Oh,
I said, well, I'm an avid tennis player. And I got that this was a set of tools and approaches that were not only therapeutic in terms of, like, I have a friend who's a therapist whose motto is, you don't have to be sick to get better.
mm-hmm.
Right. So, yeah. So this was you could use this for performance enhancement,
Right.
as well as getting rid of a troublesome, wart or phobia or whatever.
So tell us about that. You said let's use it for tennis.
Yeah, I'm an avid tennis player.
Okay.
And I've been playing all my life, and he did something, it's like the Monty Python, and now for something completely different. He didn't use the chair or the goggles or anything. He did something where I was standing up, and he had me stepping in and out of a circle and anchoring a state of excellence.
So the circle of excellence.
The circle of excellence. And he applied it specifically to tennis. Think of a time when you hit a great shot. Think of a time when you were moving effortlessly. Think of a time when you were just playing out of your mind. Think of a time, anchor, anchor, anchor. And then he explained to me, now we have installed a button.
A what?
A button. We have installed a button that you can push. And kind of like we all sort of wander in and out of different states all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems kind of haphazard. Like I woke up on the wrong side of the bed today. Wah, wah, wah.
Right.
Too bad. I guess this day is going to be a waste. Or, man, I'm having a fabulous day. I don't know what I did, but everything is falling into place. So he said, here's a secret. There are ways where you can change your state at will. I said, wow, okay. So I went out and I played somebody that I had been playing pretty regularly and kept thinking, I should be able to beat this person. And every time, I'd lose. And then after a while, it became like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking before I even got on the court, I should be able to beat him, but I'm not going to be able to. I went, and I felt like the Bionic Man, like where that TV show where everything would be like frame by frame. I'd see the ball coming big as a bowling ball. I had all the time in the world. I'm like, okay, so this must be what they call that flow state thing, right? And I beat him easily.
That's so cool.
It was very cool. And then because I'm a little bit of a doubting Thomas, I thought, well, maybe that was just an accident.
Maybe it's just an accident.
Yeah, it was just a fluke. And this was a ladder where you could challenge somebody above you, spots above you, and that's what I had done. So he had the right to re-challenge me. So we played again like 3 days later, and I again beat him easily. Wow. And he said, you're playing very consistently. And I said, thank you. And I had a realization. I had one of those aha moments, which was that in the past, when I would lose a point, I wouldn't just lose 1 point. I would often lose 2 or 3 because I would be replaying in my mind what I had done wrong or how I could have done it differently. Here, I was totally in the moment, in the now. I might lose a point, I might miss a shot, but I wasn't dwelling on that.
Yeah.
That's huge, as you know, in any area.
In anything, yes, absolutely.
Right. So I marched back into his office and I said, I'm a believer. Okay, this stuff works. And I wrote the article. And then about a year later, I was struggling with, the frog in that metaphor where you throw a frog in boiling water. They jump. Yeah. Well, I was in a pan of water that had been slowly heated up, and I was boiling to death. I used
just real quick. Let's just run through that metaphor just really quickly. So
I don't know if it's true or not, but it's
it's totally true. Just go with it.
That if you put a frog in a pan of water, if you throw it into a boiling pan of water, it will jump right out.
Jump right out again.
If you put it in a pan of water that's room temperature and slowly heat it up, the frog will never leave. It will boil to death.
Right.
So I used to tell people, I think I have a leaving disorder. Whether it's a job or a relationship, I couldn't leave. I couldn't extricate myself.
Mm-hmm.
There was always a part of me that's like, oh, it will take a lot of effort and maybe it'll just get better if I just hang in there and kind of martyr myself for a while, that.
Yeah.
So I broke that pattern and I said, time for a change, but I don't know what to do. And I was talking to Richard. This was like a year after I had written the article because we were friends. And he said, why don't you do what I do? I think you'd be good at it. And I'll train you in it. And I said, sounds like the proverbial offer I can't refuse. This is great. And he said, and my business is going so well that as soon as you're ready, I'll start funneling clients to you. You can work in my office as my associate. I said, you can get any better? He said, yes. And while you're training for a year, I need someone to manage the office. I will pay you to be my office manager while you're training. No. This guy did what my people call a mitzvah.
A mitzvah, certainly.
He did me a solid.
Yeah.
I will always be grateful to him for that. So that started me out. That was 85, 86, 87. He said, I've trained you in my way. You don't know half of what you've learned because you just sort of hear every day and you're osmosizing. Mm-hmm. And he said, but I think you should go and experience how they're doing it out there. And so I went down to the JFK, to the airport,
Mm-hmm.
Which was at that point, I think, Idlewild, right? And
I don't know.
before it was John Kennedy. Anyway, I went down there, and Stephen Lavelle
Lavelle, yeah,
was giving 100 people in a room
with his wife Jill, I think, at the
with
time.
Gillian. Yes. And they were doing a training that Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, and you're certified.
You know, I'm not sure, but I did that same thing, but it was near the LaGuardia Airport, I think. And
Maybe.
I'm not sure it was the same training or a different day or different year.
With Stephen Lavelle?
Yeah, the same exact thing. And
Yeah.
you got a book with a different page of the blue page and the red page.
Probably. And Elsa Eldridge was there helping him out.
Yep. And they had that spinning disc thing.
Little handheld.
Yeah.
Little handheld ones that they gave everybody.
Right.
And, it was so cliched. You'd have somebody look at this thing, and I know now it's an optical
optical illusion.
A compensation. After you look at something spinning in for a long time, and then you say, now quickly look at my hand or my face, and the eye compensates, and it looks like the person's face is expanding. And in that moment, which we call a shock or confusion induction, in that moment you say, close your eyes and go into trance.
Yes.
So that's that was how that training went, and
interesting. If I may stop you there, I've often referred to that training because when you exited the building, you got a certificate. They handed you.
Yes, I have. Still have mine. It says I'm an RH. That's what they were calling it back then.
Registered hypnotherapist.
Registered hypnotist.
Yeah.
But there were some good things.
There were some good things. Some things I still use.
One of the things that I remember was saying we paired off. So there are 50 pairs of people all talking at the same time, some of them 2-3 feet on either side of you. And someone said, well, this is crazy. How can I, do this? There's too much else going on here. And they said, if you can do it here, you can do it anywhere. And that came in very handy. Later, I had a client who I had to go, did a visit in the hospital. And I was asked by her daughter to come in and work with her. And she was not in a private room. There was somebody else in the next bed who was moaning and groaning.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, somebody else who was having their bedpan changed by the orderlies and a lot of clanking around. And, I was like, oh, I remember now. If I could do it there, I can do it anywhere.
Right.
And I said to her, tunnel vision. All you can see is my eyes. All you can hear is my voice.
Yeah. Now, by the way, I used similar things. I worked in a hospital for a while, so I would be using hypnosis for patients in the emergency room, not the emergency room. Sorry, the
ICU,
intensive care. Yeah.
ICU. Yeah.
And
it's great because she was like, this is. It was a funny story. The daughter said I had worked with her daughter successfully on some issue, and she said, would you see my mom? They won't release her from the hospital. She's on a breathing apparatus, and they won't release her until she can breathe on her own. Then they'll send her to rehab. I said, okay. And I went in, and I had to pretend I was just visiting. I couldn't say officially. And I went there. What the daughter hadn't told me was that her mom had a tracheotomy.
Oh, jeez.
I could not
breathe on her own through this tube in her throat.
They were passing notes back and forth to each other. So it gets funnier and funnier, but I ended up, and we use metaphor a lot. We use story a lot. We partied with that a little bit, the idea of, metaphor and stories as a teaching device. And I don't know where it came from, but I do trust my unconscious. And as I was working with her, I started talking to her about Houdini. I said, Houdini used to get locked inside of a safe that was lowered into the water. And the only way he could survive in there was by learning very carefully to monitor his breathing and breathe very effectively. And I said, and also, he was an escape artist. And the whole idea was to get her
Yeah.
out of there because she escaped from the hospital. So that was fun.
Hey, just for fun, I'm going to try this visual shift here. See what happens. Let me see if I can make this. Anyway, keep talking. Let's see if it comes back to you.
Okay.
There we go.
Thank you. I'm big now.
Now you're big.
I have a screen behind me. I hope that's all right.
Yeah, you look fine.
Okay.
You look good. So we just wanted to see more of you.
What else would you like to know?
Well, I would like to know also how you got into using music for healing, because you and I both are musicians as well, and I've never used music per se as the central focus of the healing. When I've used music, it's usually been in the background, kind of like a wash of sound, like a what do they call it? Just acoustical wash. There's another word for it. Ambient sound.
Mm-hmm.
So just unobtrusive ambient sound, just to sort of give a pillow to.
Yeah, it's a very interesting thing because it's fraught with imposters and wannabes and overnight sensations, and it's the flavor of the month now. It's mushroomed tremendously. Sound healing, sound baths. I was teaching up at Menla a month ago for a year-long certification where people get certified as a sound healer, and I'm on the faculty. I don't issue the certification.
What is Menla for the people that don't know?
Menla is run by the Tibet House, and it's a very large retreat center outside of Phoenicia, New York. Buddhist flavored, but also you can rent it. So there's a place called Sage Academy for sound healing that I'm on the faculty of, and they do a series of trainings that people come to on different, one weekend on gongs and one on crystal bowls and one on tuning forks, and people do this, and then at the end they're issued a certification of that they are now a sound healer. And I was being introduced, and the woman said, "Well, Peter's been doing this for how long?" And I said, "Well, when I started, that word wasn't around. Sound healing, sound baths, that word wasn't around. We were just musicians who were, interested in the meditational aspects. That it was something that was a way to change consciousness. As soon as you throw healing in, it gets complicated, right? What is healing? Who is the healer? Does anyone ever heal? Benjamin Franklin said, "The physician entertains and collects a fee. God heals."
Benjamin Franklin said that?
Yeah.
That's good.
Well, someone else with the same name.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's one of those things that doesn't matter who said it. I get it.
Yeah, no, it's true.
That's what we do. We entertain people.
Oh, absolutely. We do certain rituals, we do certain things, and then we give them that space to heal themselves.
We encourage them, but as soon as I say I am the healer, problem. So the sound has a healing effect on people, and I've always known this since I was a kid. Sound profoundly affected my mood, my emotions. I had a little golden record when I was little. Well, we both had the Teddy Bears Picnic because we sang that together.
We sang it together, yes.
But I had, a little golden record of Tubby the Tuba, and it was narrated by Danny the K. And it was a sad story about Tubby. He couldn't, all they ever let him do was oompa, oompa. He wasn't allowed to play in the orchestra, but then some kind conductor said, "Come on, Tubby, you can play." And it's a piece of music. I used to sit there and sob. As a 6-year-old, as an 8-year-old, it just was like the music, the story, but also the music was that it was so wistful and melancholic.
Yeah.
And so we all have this. We sort of take it for granted that couples will say, "Oh, there's our song on the radio."
Oh, yeah.
Right.
So, if I may interrupt you, so you were talking earlier in the interview about anchors.
Anchor.
Yeah. So that's the same thing, isn't it? It's a
Yeah,
music that's our song as an anchor for a time and a state and a feeling.
right, right.
Right.
It is that, and so as I continued my journey through my teen years and discovered various things like African drumming,
Mm-hmm.
and I heard it, and nobody was. I mean, it was on the radio in the '50s, and I heard this, and there was an immediate, maybe it's past life stuff. I don't know, but I didn't have anybody else in the Bronx in 1958 or nine who was interested in Baba Olatunji, but I was.
Oh, Olatunji back in the 50s.
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
Rita. I
And
think I told you this, but the first time I ever did a firewalk with Tony Robbins in 1985, it was fun. It was going along, but then when we went downstairs, because there's at the Manhattan Center on 34th Street between 8th and 9th Avenues, so we went down the stairs to do this. You could smell the smoke out from coming in, but Baba Olatunji was there with several of his musicians, and the sound was incredible. You know,
yeah,
these boom, just massive, loud,
yeah.
rhythmic
The
drums. It's like,
rhythm and the volume and the
ah,
feeling of it is very
man,
powerful. So, no, there was a radio station in New York City. Maybe it was a little bit later. It might have been 60, 61. Whenever Drums of Passion had come out, the first
uh-huh.
recording he made.
God, I
And
didn't know it was that long
there
ago.
there
Wow.
was a disc jockey named Murray the K.
Mirth.
Right?
No,
Murray the K used to play like doo-wop and the Coasters and the Platters
yeah,
and
yeah.
uh, and he got a hold of this record and he played little excerpts of it in between, the popular music, the rock and roll. And I heard that and I was like, that's what I want.
Wow.
So I discovered that early. And then I also, WQXR, which was the radio station of the New York Times, which my
Yeah.
parents had on all the
Classical music.
time, classical music, mostly, almost exclusively classical music. But on Sundays, again, this was like 60, 61. I was like 14 years old. They
Uh-huh.
had a show of North Indian classical music for an hour or two.
North Indian classical
Yeah,
music.
Ravi Shankar,
Yeah, yeah.
ragas. And this was before George Harrison had made it popular. And again, nobody that I knew what that was, but I used to listen to it and be fascinated by it.
Wow.
So years later, I'm following all these different types of music
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
and the Tibetan Buddhist chanting that I discovered, which was so enthralling and hypnotic. And then I discovered what the unifying thread
What
was
is
that they actually all were hypnotic. Right?
Tell
When I
me,
learned
how are
about
they all hypnotic? Tell me more. Tell me.
and learned about hypnosis, I'm like, oh, that's the common thread. All of these sounds, the African drumming,
Yeah,
the Indian ragas,
yeah.
Tibetan Buddhist chanting, later the sound of the Tibetan singing bowls,
Go on.
put me into a hypnotic state.
How specifically did they do
How specifically? Um,
that?
doing, I'm trying to figure out what the best answer to that is. I could give a number of answers, but the how of it, I only understood later on. I just understood that they did, and then I began researching what's going on with these sounds. What is and I have this acronym in my book, which is a useful little collection of letters for
Mm-hmm.
hypnotists, because I'm trying to train people in hypnosis about why sound is so useful as a way of inducing and sustaining as well as supporting trance, right? So I have this acronym FACE, and it's FACE, and
Yeah.
it's simple. The F stands for fixation of attention, because almost every induction employs some form of fixation of attention,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
Look
The
at the spinning wheel.
spinning wheel thing. Yeah. Yep.
Or as Erickson would talk about, this ocular fix, or look deeply into my eyes, or anything
Right. Or in Erickson's case, also the fixation of attention through the story.
through the story.
Yeah.
Prohibiting the touch,
Yeah.
right?
So
So
what's A stand for in face?
anchoring, which we already talked about, right? The the assigning consciously or unconsciously of a particular stimulus with a state.
Okay.
I mean, there are many definitions, but that's the one that I'm using.
I
Right?
like it.
Stimulus.
It's good.
The
And
C stands for confusion, and I wouldn't like to say too much more about that right now because it might get too confusing. Only to say that it is a stopping of the rational mind in order for creative solutions to come in.
Great.
So confusion, Erickson said, is a blessed state. And certain sounds can be very confusing and disorienting.
Yeah.
I do overtone singing. Someone's never heard it before. They're like, what is that sound?
Right.
It's an interrupt of their normal patterns. And the E, which maybe is the most essential part of this, is for entrainment.
Entrainment.
Entrainment is a principle in physics that says that any two objects that are oscillating or vibrating close to the same frequency will tend to lockstep.
Mm-hmm.
It's sometimes called the frequency following effect.
Huh.
And it is demonstrated by various examples. I usually talk about fireflies, a bunch of swarm of them that are blinking asynchronously. And then they'll come closer together and they'll start to blink in sync.
Oh, wow. Cool. And I think they actually did that with metronomes, didn't they?
Oh, this was how it was discovered. There was a Dutch scientist named Christian Huygens. I don't know why I remember that, but I do.
Good.
Who had a bunch of metronome clocks on a wall.
Uh-huh.
Story goes, and they were all swinging, and he left for a while. They were out of sync, and he came back a couple hours later, and they were all swinging.
All swinging at the same time. Yeah.
So, there's theories that it has to do maybe with the efficiency of energy in the universe, the conservation of energy. It's easier for things to move together than separately, right?
Yeah.
Now, we know this in a more subtle way when we work with establishing rapport with anyone, with a client, with a business dealing. You want to be in rapport. You want to be in sync with the person, right? They lean forward, you lean forward. They tilt their head this way, you tilt your head that way. They use a phrase, you use the phrase several times this week in bandwidth. So I deliberately used it in talking to you earlier today. So we store these things. What?
I said, you dog you.
No, it's not even a conscious thing. It's best when it's not conscious.
Mm.
It's best when it's very organic and natural.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the person's going like, "What are you making a monkey out of me? You're just copying me." But
that's really true. Really true.
So to be in rapport, it's a very natural thing, and I sometimes refer to it like dancing.
Yes,
you're dancing with a pas de deux, or you're dancing with a partner, and how do you learn to move together? What is the mystery of George Leonard? There's a wonderful book called The Silent Pulse. It's been out for a really long time. This book, The Silent Pulse, George Leonard, and he writes about a conductor and an orchestra. That the whole orchestra is entrained, and the conductor is ostensibly leading. It's not really. I mean, there's an entrainment that happens after a while. So everybody's moving together, playing together. So and this goes to then the basic rhythms of life, heart rate, respiration, pulse, brainwave frequencies.
Okay.
We're not aware of these consciously most of the time, but they have a great deal to do with determining our state of consciousness, our emotional state, right?
So let me just think if I'm taking this face thing back to how you said that all of those musics were hypnosis inducing.
Yes.
I'm thinking, of course, there's a fascination. So there's a fixation of attention on the music.
Right.
There's a anchoring to it because, oh, this is the time I'm listening to music. Maybe it's WQXR is on, or it's bedtime, or it's Murray the K's show as you're listening, because there's that anchor to it. There's confusion because it's strange, it's different. Bob Olatunji in 1956 or whatever it was you said, it's different.
It's different.
It was different for me in 1985.
it's different, and yet for me it was very familiar.
Yeah. And then there's an entrainment to it because there is a steadiness to the rhythm in all those musics.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I think, I worked with studying with people who use shamanic journey,
Mm-hmm.
and I was involved right at the same time that I was learning hypnosis from Richard Zarrow, 88, 89. I was invited by a friend who was studying with Michael Harner, the founder of the Foundation for Shamanic Studies.
Oh,
And he was learning about this technique of journeying, where you play a drum and people go traveling to find their spirit guide,
yeah.
and
I'm familiar
maybe
with it. Yeah,
animal.
absolutely. I'm familiar. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I was invited into this group, and we had these experiences, and I'm thinking, it was really kind of like a group hypnosis. I mean, it's
Hmm.
not all that different. It's slightly different cultural context, but
Exactly.
instead of someone talking, someone's drumming.
Right.
And then, being a curious kind of guy, I thought, well, I'm working in Richard's office. We have these alpha theta brainwave machines that are sending pulse, light, and sound in the alpha and theta frequencies to entrain the brain. I wonder if, and I took a frame drum and I started playing it at the rhythm that seemed about what we would listen to Journey. And I had my wristwatch and I timed it for a minute, and it was 280 beats in a
Wow.
minute. And if you divide that by 60, that's about 4.5 beats, which is right in the very low theta,
So it's 4.5 beats per second.
4.5 beats per second.
Wow. You have a good wrist there to be drumming that fast.
A lot of practice.
No, that's a fast.
And it was like, aha. So could these old shamans intuitively, they didn't have EEGs or
Mhm.
oscilloscopes, but
Yeah,
could they intuitively have known that certain rhythms help
certain
the
states.
brain go into that state?
Yeah.
Then African drumming, where you're using two hands, African, uh, uh, um, uh, what do they call it? Afro-Cuban, Latin drumming, congas, djembes, where you're using two hands is faster. And that's more probably in the alpha rhythms.
Hmm.
So listening to Baba Olatunji or African drumming, it'll bring you, if you don't resist, if you go along with it, easily into an alpha state.
Right.
So these are the kind of things that it took me years to kind of think about this and put together. I recognized the phenomenon first, and
Right.
then I was like, okay, so what's going on
So we're gonna have to begin to wrap up soon. I know that we both have to
there? Yeah,
leave
yeah.
in just a few minutes.
I have to go before I sleep.
So, for the people who are listening and they're going like, "Well, that's really interesting, and how do I use that for myself?" How can people use this awareness that those musics create trance in change work, in coaching practice, or hypnosis, or therapy practice?
Uh, well, like Richard said, what would I use this for? And when I said that, and he said, anything you want. I mean,
Uh,
the possibilities are endless. I teach, I do it with my clients. They come to me for hypnosis, and they're expecting the standard thing, more or less. I will talk to them. I'll put them in a chair. Maybe I'll have them stare at the wall or at my finger, and I'll talk to them. And I do that. But I'll also say sometimes, I have this feeling that it might be helpful to support you if I played the drum, like like I was doing for a while during your piece this
mhm.
weekend, a heartbeat drum,
That's it. Yeah.
right? Which
Yeah.
is different than the shamanic. But again, that's an entrainment to a regular pattern that's very recognizable. People don't even know it, but if you hear the
Mhm.
that's the heart. So I will use that, or I'll use tuning forks, which I haven't talked about too much, as another tool to and people say that was great. How could I do that? And I said, well, it's very easy. I happen to sell tuning forks as well, and you can buy a set, and take it home and just tune yourself every morning. The My go-to for everyone is
His voice.
voice, because voice is the original instrument. It's something that we're all born with. Some people say, well, I don't know how to drum, or, I don't play an instrument. You play all these instruments. They say in Africa, and people have been traumatized, by well-intentioned chorus teachers. I had this one woman who said, they told me in junior high school, just move your lips. And can you imagine that person now trying to sing and having that negative imprint? So,
I can well imagine, actually.
So we want to reverse these negative, self-limiting hypnotic suggestions that were made, right? That people unconsciously took in. And I say in Africa, they have a proverb: if you can walk, you can dance. If you can talk, you can sing. It's birthright. Open your mouth and just make a noise.
Yeah.
Don't worry about, like they say, dance like no one's watching, sing like no one's listening.
Yeah.
Go out in the woods and holler.
Yeah.
Free your voice.
Beautiful.
Because the voice is breath made audible. If we do with the voice and do extended singing, they don't have to come to me. They can do that on their own.
Sure.
They will change their state.
Is there any particular vowel that you would like chant or something like that? That would be
Ah.
Ah
is always a good one. Ah. Yeah, the sound in many systems is placed in the heart. So, you can put your hand over your heart and you just open your mouth and you go, and you take a breath, and you don't think about what note you're singing or what pleasing anyone. You're just like a sigh.
Yeah.
Like, ah.
Nice.
Yeah, and just feel what that sound feels like. And then if you want to extend it a little bit, you can go
All right. And suddenly you've made it into a note, and suddenly you're singing.
Yeah, singing.
Yeah.
And
it's kind of interesting, if I might interrupt you. I'm sorry that I interrupt you. Children all over the world somehow have the same tune. I don't know if it's genetic or what, but they all go na 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 na.
Yeah.
Right? And that's a melody.
Studies that have been done on intervals that show up around the world in different cultures in lullabies that are the same intervals, whether you're in Tasmania, or in Mongolia, or whatever. It doesn't matter. There's certain it's like, I'm being rocked to sleep. Right. So inflections that are somewhere maybe archetypally stored in the brain.
Yeah, they certainly seem to be. Absolutely.
Yeah. So is this a good stopping place?
I think it is a good stopping place because you got to go.
Thank you. And thank you for having me on the show. Can I tell people how to reach me?
Oh, I would be delighted if you told people how to reach you.
So I have a website, and that's probably the best way through it. It's called soundsforhealing.com.
Soundsforhealing.com.
One word. And, through there, it can say, it gives my phone number and email, and you can contact me. And I am happy to work with anybody on anything.
Fantastic. And we will also, of course, have that printed on the description for this podcast as well. So it'll be very easy for people to find.
Coming to Woodstock.
Peter Blum. Yes. Hey, did you ever do one of those drum circles in Woodstock, the famous drum circle?
I was doing drum circles before they had that
word. Before they had drum circles.
Right. Yes, I've done drum circles. Thank you again.
All right. Thank you so much.
You well.
This has been the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast. Thank you for being here. It's a pleasure seeing you again. Hope to see you again real soon. Come back next week when we have another gripping and exciting episode of the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast. And if you want to, you can find out more about us, each and every one of us, at essentialcoachingskills.com. Thanks.